Let's continue. I will use just one slide to capture the data and application analysis items. I'm doing so because I don't want to wander into too much detail about data and application so that we get into the design arena. Because my intention here is to focus on the analysis layer. For data analysis, the most important item to construct is the enterprise data model and the specific task domain data model under analysis. Now you'll be surprised that how many organizations don't have their data model documented. In both the bank and the DSO case, I had to conduct reverse engineering of their databases to derive the ER diagrams. One of the often missed items is data mapping. Okay. This is not a surprise because if you have a new application that's introduced and you don't have old data to convert, and therefore you don't need a data mapping analysis. But this is extremely important because it not only tells you how to convert old data into new data, but also you may find there's a big gap between the old and the new data model. Now this was the case in the DSO case. I spent almost 3 months just to convince the organization that they do need to conduct this analysis, and then they found out that there are data items that's in the old data model that has no place in the new data model. I call this homeless old data. And also you find out in order to maintain the new data model integrity, like for foreign key reference integrity, and you don't have the data in the old data model to convert over. Okay. Now you can't wait till it's time to switch to the new system for production use and then find out all these problems. For application analysis, we're going to be pretty brief here. Now obviously each application may or may not have its own data model. Okay, that's one thing we need to analyze. And then we want to analyze what's a function feature and what's the interface and what's the access control. And here the interface probably is the lightest item for analyst. And another important item today for application is the change management. Sometimes we use the change request, CR, as a term to describe that. And this is especially true, let's say, if you are a fairly big customer from a software vendor that you buy their application, and then you need a lot of customization of it, and the software vendor may decide to do that for you. Okay, in this case, you need to be very careful to manage the process of the change request. From the user side, obviously you need to have the requirements as being forwarded to the vendor, and then there's a back forth negotiation about resource concerns and prioritization and stuff like that. And when it's all over, the changes in the new application may have a ripple effects into your existing data and system model, and where it's going to cause changes, and that's a big analysis item that you need to keep in mind. Now buckle up. We finally arrived at the door of the most challenging problem, which is the interaction analysis. Now first, just for you to be able to conceive the interaction analysis, you need to develop an overall map of the task domain. This is not necessarily a deliverable item to your customer, but this is a must-have for you as a super analyst to really understand the terrain before you embark on a journey. Okay, let me use the example I did for the DSO to demonstrate the point. Now this is the map of the task domain I developed for the DSO case. Now essentially we're looking at three parts here. They were separated by two boxes. Outside all the boxes are the people. These are the business teams that are charged with certain specific tasks. What's in between two boxes, now by the way, I wiped out some of the text labels that are commercial secret here. Between two boxes are the business processes that are performed by these different teams. The inner box contains the application and data infrastructure, which is the center of the work platform, which support these teams to carry out their tasks. Okay, so for any analysis that you conduct, you must know where does it fit, which part of it, what's the other part that are connected to it. And even before you can conceive questions to ask people about the interactions among them. The first rather detailed item of interaction analysis is to understand and document the dynamic use of application data in business processes. This kind of analysis are generally conducted, so they're widely conducted. The process flow, okay, and the use of IT and data. Now, one of the problems that I've seen is a common problem actually, is that people separate two threads of analysis. So it's very typical that you have a set of business process diagrams that captures all the tasks, the flow, and the people who perform the tasks. And then you have an application and data use, like in data flow diagrams and stuff like that. But actually, I really suggest that we should know they're interlocking at the operational level. That means real time. And who, while doing what work, will use what application, in what order, and what interactions that they may have with various data stores. Again, let's take an example. Okay, this is one particular sample process and IT interaction diagram that I draw for the DSO. This is about the patient registration. As you can see, it looks like a process flow diagram. And we have patient and office who are functional agents who actually carry out certain business tasks. And they each got their own swim lane, and they are connected. But what I added to this, if you look at the queue lane and the other system lane, are the two primary applications that the office and the patient will use while going through this process. And then there are various data stores along the way where they store intermediary results of work, or read or generate reports and stuff like that. So this is an example that we mix together the business process, the people, and how they're going to use IT and data along the way, real time at the operational level. Now this is extremely important for you to document when you get to the requirement part. So we're not just testing various system functions, but we want to test system and data functions in the specific correct order while people doing their work. So this analysis of mixed analysis is a principle that I definitely want to recommend. Now, let's get to another layer of dynamic use of data. Now here, you have probably done a lot of diagrams such as data flow diagrams or CRUD matrix, which links together application and data store items like entities or columns or even rows. And here's like which application is going to create data, to read data or update or delete data. Finally, here's the tough issue: is how do various subsystems and data items in an organization's IT infrastructure integrate with each other. Now here, I just want to refresh our memory. In previous part of episode 1, we introduced a basic concept of how do subsystems depend on each other. Now they can be sequentially related to each other, or parallel interact with each other, or they have the pooled relationship, okay, which is the foundation for us to understand the integration. Second, I want to introduce the data-centric principle of integration. Okay, what that means is that when you look at today's applications, when different systems needs to interact with each other, okay, unless it's in a real time that one application triggers the other, and their connections are mostly through the data store underlying that. Understanding that fact leads to the data-centric principle. That is, in designing the infrastructure and architecture of an organization, we need to anchor our analysis on the data model, not driven by each individual applications. Now we must understand the data store, have an integrated design of the data store, and then conceive all these interactions among applications through the data model, rather than through like flags or APIs or messaging or other kinds of trigger mechanisms. Okay, this is the most important principle, and it is especially important when you have an old portfolio of applications and databases, and you want to migrate into a new architecture and infrastructure. And the best practice is not to carry over the entire application portfolio with their individual databases, but rather you try to integrate the data, have a centralized enterprise data model first, and then on top of that you have different applications, and applications integrate with each other through the repository of the data store. You may set up certain data items as flags for other applications to read periodically, for example, to implement the interactions between those two systems. There's no single types of diagram that's going to capture all the enterprise system integration needs. And this is a rather complex item that I will dedicate some time in a later episode of how to analyze to explain the various innovative documentation ways for this. Finally, let's take a look at some of the miscellaneous analysis agenda items. From time to time, you may be asked to conduct a software evaluation, and oftentimes you would do a gap analysis between the functionality that's required for a certain set of business requirements and the functionality of what the application as a candidate can provide. And a super analyst oftentimes may be called upon to organize and manage the UAT process. For example, you may be asked to construct testing scenarios, testing cases, and drawn up testing passes. And also, you may be asked to compile a UAT plan, which is basically user who will do what and when and where. You may also have the responsibility to have progress tracking and retesting throughout the UAT process. Many times, actually, a super analyst is the most important resource that a program manager or project manager can rely on to come up with a WBS for project planning. You may also find yourself in a place where a Scrum Master relies on you to define works for epics, which is basically a packaging. What set of work that you want to do it in one epic, let's say for 2 weeks, rather than some epics have a lot of things to do and can't finish, and some other epics only have too few items to conduct. And oftentimes I was called upon to help out with the refactoring. That means that the certain work that you packaged for one epoch, some went through, some didn't. So we need to revisit that in later epochs. So what are they? And these are fairly detailed, sometimes complex tasks to manage. Well, I have developed a list of analysis items for you. My last objective today is to help you to choose analysis items from the list for a particular project. Now remember, the list is like a menu, but can you just order from it randomly for a particular project? Well, not quite. Now certain items are simply not relevant to all types of project. That's why I developed this table as a guide for you. Now first, I just put down 4 generic project types. There can be more detailed classification of projects. For all types of project, you probably need to do some business analysis, data modeling, integration, and UAT. Okay? I say proper because the scope of the analysis may be different. It depends on the project, and usually that's defined in the project charter. And also, certain items you only need to do it once. For example, SOA for an organization. If you have done that before, and certainly you don't need to repeat that for every project. Okay, and then there are special items you want to add on to your choices depending on the project type. For example, if it's a new development, you probably need to do a full modeling of the application data, function, interface design. If you are modifying an existing application, and most likely you need to go through a make or buy comparison, and you need to track incremental changes to the requirements. If you're buying a new application from a vendor, then most likely you need to go through a software evaluation in addition to the basic analysis items. Okay? And regardless, it's a make or buy, if the new application will replace an existing one, and then you need to do the data mapping and analyze, figure out the data gaps, and come up with a data migration strategy and plan. I think I've made a case that there's a tremendous amount of work out there awaiting a super analyst. But isn't that also a tremendous opportunity for you to shine as a super analyst? My objective is to help you to shine in the following episodes. In episodes 2, I will start by tackle the question of who are you working for and who are you working with in conducting analysis. I'll see you next time.